Good evening, afternoon, morning, night, wherever you are, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Still have people rolling in, but I'm going to get started. Hello, everybody. Some of you might have noticed that I'm not Jared Lander, the general host of New York R. My name is Noam Ross. I'm a longtime New York R meetup member, sometimes speaker, and friend of the meetup. I'm a computational biologist here in New York, and I'm pinch hitting for Jared today as he had to travel suddenly for work. But thanks everybody for coming. We have, like I said, lots of people from pretty far away, and I'll just jump in with the announcements. First of all, if any of you are not members of our Slack, Nicole's gonna put a link in the chat, and we have, Jared jumped into the Slack himself, so he'll tell you why he won't be here. But you can join our Slack because that's where we have our monthly meetup chat, our jobs board, and that's the best place for you to ask your questions for the Q&A at the end of the talk. One of the things that's in that Slack is our jobs board. Of course, when we are in person, we have everyone in the audience give a shout out if they are hiring. Since we can't have everybody give a shout out here, we have a jobs board within the Slack group. Jared will let you know that Lander Analytics is hiring. They're looking for an account executive, a data science engineer, and a Shiny developer. My research group, EcoHealth Alliance, is also hiring at the moment. We're looking for a research software engineer to help run our high performance computing setup, and as well as the data services that we use for our field and lab scientists around the world. If you have any interest in that, please give me a ping on the New York R Slack. I'd love to talk with anyone who's talking about that. And if you have a job, if you're hiring, your organization is hiring, or you know of something that people in the meetup would be interested in, please go into the Slack and give it a post in the jobs posting channel. It's how we all sort of support each other here at New York R. Next, we have some events coming up. The Nodes 2022 conference is coming November 16th and 17th, and that's a virtual online free conference that is around the Neo4j developer community. We'll post a link here so you can register for that event that's coming up. And then the Government and Public Sector R conference run by this group here at Lander Analytics will be December 1st and 2nd, and that will be hybrid. So it'll be in person at Georgetown University in DC, or you can attend virtually online. And we have a lot of great people there. David Shore from Blue Rose Research, David Meza from NASA. They'll have Alex Gold from our studio. I know there'll be Colin Carlson from the Verena Research Group, good friend of mine, who will have a lot of great things to say, and lots of people from the FDA, the US Army, Department of Homeland Security, and a lot of other government and public sector groups. On the 30th, there's a workshop associated with that conference on natural language processing for public policy research that William Doan is going to teach, so you can sign up for that. And for the workshop and the tickets, you can use the promo code NYHackR to get 20% off. In addition to that, the link is in the chat and the Slack. There are scholarships for people of color and underrepresented minorities, which you can apply for. We'll post the link for that as well, and you can apply for that through November 11th. And 2 people attending tonight will get free tickets for the conference. And so if you stay on to the end of the talk, we're going to pick people randomly from people who have signed in and registered, and then they'll get free registration codes. So stick around for the whole talk, not just because of what Bob has to say. Next month, we are back in person and hybrid for our meetup. We will be at Brain Station, which is a neat space in Soho, and we'll be joined by Toph Allen, who's a developer from our studio's product products group, and he'll be talking about some of the work he's doing there. There'll be an invite sent out either at the end of this week or early next week, and you can join us in person, where once again we'll have pizza for everybody, maintain the decade-long New York City-wide pizza ratings data set that we've had at the New York R meetup for all that time. Speaking of which, I have a mushroom and meatball slice tonight. Jared would tell you something about the cheese stickiness or the crust spottiness, but mine is just from the slicery around the corner, and it's got mushrooms and sausage on it. If you're having pizza for the meetup, if you're having dinner, post in the meetup chat what you are making or cooking while we're all talking tonight. And you can, and then next month we'll actually do it together for those who are in New York. I'm about to introduce Bob. We'll have questions at the end. Please post all the questions in the Slack meetup chat. If you can't get into the Slack, you can use the chat, but it's always great to have it in the meetup channel, because then lots of people can answer your questions in addition to us here. So I am very pleased to introduce my good friend, Bob Rudis. Bob Rudis has nearly 30 years of experience using data to help protect people and their computers, especially big Fortune 100 companies. He's currently the VP of Data Science at Gray Noise Intelligence, and what he does is do spectacular data science and research on understanding malicious activity on the internet and helping organizations to defend themselves through the power of data. He's the author of Data-Driven Security. He's the author of more R packages than I can remember, and a huge contributor to the R ecosystem and the R community. I'll also say he has an absolutely excellent blog and newsletter that's up almost every day. The blog is about more data science and data stuff. The newsletter seems to be about everything that's kind of neat with computers besides R and data stuff, and it distracts me daily from doing my job because there's always a new toy to play with in it. So I'd say go over and read and subscribe to that, because it's absolutely spectacular. Tonight, he's going to be talking about democratizing data science and team comms with Quarto. So if you're interested in Quarto and I'll let him explain it to you, how Quarto can be used, especially with multilingual teams. We're in for a treat tonight. So Bob, over to you.
Thank you, Noam, for that great introduction. And it's really great to be here. I'm actually really nervous because I haven't had and this isn't really even our speaking thing I'm doing, but I haven't had a data science speaking thing in a while. We're going to go through a presentation here, and the idea of democratizing everything associated with data has, I think, been really important to me even before this thing called data science was actually a thing. And it's kind of great that I married who I married, because it's also one of my wife's passions as well too, trying to help enable everyone to have the tools and the skills and the knowledge necessary to do really great work with data. And I will get to this a little bit later. And as Noam mentioned, my blog, which I'll drop a couple links to throughout the slides here. I have focused mainly on R with that one on there, and I'm going to talk about the focus on R and some other things in a minute too. But this idea of democratizing data science, that doesn't work if you just say R only, right? There are so many languages. Actually, that's one of the reasons why I started the newsletter that Noam was talking about. There's just so many languages, so many ecosystems, and so many ways that folks just come into technology, come into programming, can then hopefully eventually come into doing work with data, if you want to call it data science or not. It's a nice catchword, but data science, and coming up with ways to ensure that they can communicate with the other members of the team, with other members of the organization, with the community, with the internet as a whole, since we all have, we can all do that. Really became even that much more important to me once I started stalking all the folks involved in creating this wonderful Quarto ecosystem that we have here. So I'm gonna just really quick get through some boilerplate stuff on here. So these slides are available. I've already dropped the links to all the amazing caretakers of your group. The one thing I just want to point out on here is like you're not like you might not know what this symbol is on here. We're going to get to what that symbol is in a minute. But these are the places that you can find me and to kind of do some things. And I'm going to talk about my company, not from like a selling standpoint, but I'm going to talk about data science at my company, how I view data science at it, how we are working to democratize data science internally at the organization, and how we view Quarto as an enabler for doing that kind of work. So you can find all of my noisy stuff out there. Pretty much everywhere there's that blue shield. Sometimes there's a little bit of gold on there for support for Ukraine. Everywhere that is, it's me. If it's not there, it's probably not me. So to tease you into staying for the whole thing. And I mean, I could go really quick if someone wants to give me like half their ticket or something for this, but like I'll take the whole time. It's cool. I do have some goals that I'm trying to achieve I'm hoping to achieve with the presentation. So I want to like help you folks understand what those are. So one of the main goals, if not the main goal of this, is to help enable your team members, and so you and your team members, to research, to experiment, to work, basically just to produce the way and communicate the way that they're most comfortable and productive doing so. And that doesn't mean creating a funnel, right? Like I said earlier, into one language, into one tool, into one part of the ecosystem or one tiny ecosystem. There's not much democratization about that. That's kind of exclusivity, and that's really not where we're going to need to be and where we want to be. So Quarto is an environment, and we'll talk way more about Quarto in a little bit, but it's an environment that I guess you could do like automation and programmatic work with it, like, and you can generate reports and stuff with it, of course. I guess that's sort of one output, but like you're not going to stand up Quarto as an ML ops environment where you're going to have APIs hitting it and stuff come out there. I'm sure someone's going to do an amazing hack to do that if they haven't already, because we have such a great creative ecosystem. But honestly, I view Quarto as a tool and an ecosystem designed to help us unify and level up the artifacts we generate for each other. I view the outputs, the targets, the really end goal of anything we do with Quarto as something that humans are going to read, hopefully enjoy, and hopefully get a lot of information out of, and also contribute back into. I also think, well, it's not going to be the be-all end-all of reproducibility, like on that kind of MLOps API, REST API interface or whatever. I do think that Quarto goes a much longer way than even R Markdown was able to get us there, and even make files, decades before that were able to do, to finally get us to a point where we can start truly being able to reproduce each other's experiments, whether that's internal or whether that's external. I'm seeing a lot more noise out on the internet of there being like less of a reproducibility crisis. I know it's still there for like science people, like I know it's still a problem, but it seems to be less of a problem and growing less of a problem, at least in certain portions of the internet that I kind of monitor. And then like this is kind of mostly for me, but like this one reason why I do the newsletter too. Like I want to use what the cool kids are doing. Like I'm not one of the cool kids, but I want to use what they're doing. I find Quarto just so cool. And all the stuff around, all the tooling, all the people, all the contributors, all the creativity it's spawning. It's just super neat. And just being part of that just helps keep you alive and keep you energized. And so like hopefully you'll get a little bit of that bite if you haven't actually used Quarto here. So I need to stop for a minute, because I did drop something on Twitter earlier that I'm also going to reveal here, right after this slide. And you hear me talking about democratizing and letting people use stuff that they're familiar with, and not being maybe an R purist. And I think I'm fairly certain that I come off, or tend to come off, as maybe an R purist, or at least sort of anti. And I won't mention who the antis are yet, but like I come off against certain ecosystems out there. I am not going to renege or go back and apologize for any of that, because a good part of me still actually believes that certain ecosystems should die a horrible, painful death. But they're being used by folks. They're being used by folks very productively. And what's even cooler is there's even more things happening outside of what we're all familiar with and what we all use on a regular basis that are coming in, and they're going to sweep us out from under the rug if we're not watching them and if we're not making them part of what we do and encouraging folks to contribute from those things. So in the past, I have been quite opinionated. I still am quite opinionated. I don't think that's ever going to change, much to my entire family's chagrin and everyone on the internet. So in this one, this is not so much opinionated, Bob, from a, hey, our hard master, from a, like, you're going to use R, you're going to use this thing. I'm opinionated that we have to open up what we do. We have to make things more accessible. We have to bring more folks on. Not, and this isn't just because like they work at our company, or we like, this is making our ecosystem more diverse. This is getting a whole bunch of different viewpoints. This is getting a whole bunch of creativity and ideas and just ways of thinking that we're not used to. And yeah, I know Quarto is a tool, and I know this is like, we're generating reports, we're making, but this actually changes things. Like when people come together and ideas come together and we build really cool things together and we share information together, that's where real power happens. So my opinion here is that we need to do a better job of bringing in the entire fold with this. So that's part of what this, everyone is entitled to my opinion here. And again, I'm not apologizing for previous Bob. This was going to be a secret that I just told everyone on here, but I thought I would drop it on the internet just to get a couple more attendees. Big secret. There was zero R code used in the creation of tonight's presentation. This is a Quarto presentation. This is something called Reveal.js. I'm fairly certain that like I recognize a lot of the names on the attendee list. So I think every single person there probably knows what Quarto is and knows what Reveal.js is. Quarto isn't just about reports, and it isn't just another version of R Markdown, and it isn't, it isn't that. Like Quarto is an entire broad ecosystem. One of them is the ability to create presentations, and this is a Reveal.js presentation on here. And I actually deliberately set out to do this presentation. I mean, first of all, there is no code in the presentation. I'm not showing a lick of code. Actually, that's not entirely true. I show screenshots of code, so I guess that counts as that. But it was entirely made with Python. Yeah, Python. Everybody wake up. I'll give you a chance in a minute to get smelling salts or whatever. So with Python, and with something called Observable. We're going to talk about Observable later. So I'll drop that later. And I guess I'm fibbing a little bit, a little bit with no R was used in this thing. So if one call to like rvest, read HTML, and popping out some HTML is if that counts as R code to you, okay, I did. It's not in the presentation. There's no R code like in the directory tree, but I did do that. So like if there's a mea culpa, I guess there's 3 lines of R code, but still, like for me, like that's like nothing. It's like that's like I can sleep and dream through R3 pretty quickly. So one reason why I care deeply about this, let's bring all the folks into the fold, is that 10 years ago, and like it's probably arguable that this really wasn't as simplistic as I'm making it, but 10 years ago, what we do right now for livings, because we're all doing something related to data science with this, our universe was a lot smaller than it is right now. This is a 2021, because I don't think Matt has actually dropped one for 2022 yet. But he does one almost every year. And this is the current ecosystem of data and AI that was cataloged for 2021. I will see if I can remember how to do my clicks inside here. So like it goes from everything from like infrastructure and like all of the things that you can like just pour scads and scads of money into, like AWS, which is terrible, or databases or everything out there. And it goes to, to every single thing, like, ETL and transformation things. Monitoring, observability, like these are all components of what most things happen in data science shops now. It isn't just about running some R code. And even in academia, I mean, I think there probably is some cases where you can just sort of isolate yourself and do some things. I kind of saw that when my oldest son was going to school for physics. I guess you can compartmentalize yourself if you want to. But the reality is there's just so many things out there. And like even down here for like data sources and APIs, there's just some things, but like you have to touch all these things to kind of go do that. And there's so many ways that you can access those things. And you've got query languages like galore and all sorts of ways that we can actually do things on here. So like you can take a look at this and dig into it. The URL is down there, but it's also in the presentation. If we lock ourselves into one way of thinking, if we lock ourselves into one way of communicating, if we lock ourselves into one way of doing documentation or sharing knowledge and information, like with the rest of our peers, with the rest of the company, with the rest of the planet, we're like, I just don't know how you can do that and be successful in 2022 and beyond. I guess you could try to be, but a purist shop is, I don't think, you're going to get the best combination of folks together to build the best thing that we possibly could. So there's a lot out there, and this is a giant reason why I'm hoping to convince everybody here to get on the Quarto train, to adopt a multilingual data science shop or IT shop, or however you want to phrase what you folks do, and kind of bring all those things together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about data science at Gray Noise Intelligence, where I work, mostly because I want you to see that like the life of a cyber person is either as cool or as boring as how you may feel like your data science life to be in your organization. So okay, one thing you probably don't have is planetary scale passive sensor data where we look at what everything's happening on the internet. You probably don't have that. If you do, you definitely need to talk to me after this, or you hit me up if I don't know you already. Except that most of my time, I mean, and I wish I could ask for hands on this at the webinar, so I can't, I realize that. But if you want to just like show your support inside the Slack channel, which I'm also not in, a lot of my stuff is grouped by summarize. A lot of my most productive data science, a lot of my larger insights, a lot of the ways that I communicate best with like the average individual out there is with the group by summarize, and like knowing how to divide by the right things and knowing how to group by the right things and how to exclude the right things, like all of the stuff that's involved in that. And you guys all know that it's kind of a running gag in data science. A lot of my life is like that. And I like doing that part of it because I like to be able to explain things to folks. And this is the easiest way that I found to explain those things. We also do like other fancier things like, fundamental time series analytics on all this event data that we get like flowing through our system. I believe it's going to be in like mid-ish November. I'll blast it on Twitter so you'll see it. But we're actually going to talk about like the size and scale and scope of everything that we have at Gray Noise in a blog post. So I'm not going to bore you here on that one. But we have a lot of data. We have a lot of events. We have like over 5,000 sensors across the planet. In networks everywhere. Some of them I can't even tell you where they are. And like we get a lot of data, we get a lot of eventing, and the time series stuff is actually pretty fundamental to what we've been doing, and especially what we're going to be doing moving forward. And then we do fancy, I'm going to put double quotes in that because like every time I log on and see something with stable diffusion, I kind of just shake my head and like go like this because like nothing I do even comes close to how cool that is. But we have our own fancy MLNI things that are pretty neat, and we also have some blog posts coming out about the details of those things as well too. So again, I'll know you on Twitter about that. I don't need to take a whole lot more time on here for there. So this hopefully sounds a little bit at least like some of the shops like that are out there that you folks are in. The scale, like I know JD's on, and like JD's like financial data scale and crop data scale and things like that. It's close to, if not more sometimes than some of mine. So some of you have that scale thing, some of yours our data is like a lot smaller, and I would sometimes kill to work with smaller data more often too. So we work with that data. We also, the data science team works with all the website, blog, however you want to phrase like the things that when people touch your website or touch your application. We work with all of that data as well too. We're not just cyber data scientists. We are, just data scientists. We want to use data to make our organization function better, enable all the people at our organization to do better work and do awesome work. And this is one part of it, so we can know what kind of effect we're having. Are we doing the right things? Business intelligence. I mean, I remember when that was a term like first came out. Like I do have the gray hair to show that. But all of the things that encompass that, the good, the bad, and the ugly around business intelligence. Like so, we do all that as well too. And then we try to get sales just like the rest of you folks. Sales enablement, sales insights, all of those things. We kind of do those things. There is a method to this madness. And then any question that my boss, my wonderful, awesome boss, I'm not really sucking up because if anyone follows me, you know that I berate him regularly on Twitter. But everything he asks me, everything the governments out there ask us for, or anything that our users or community asks, we do our best if we can answer that data answer those questions as well too. So everything that I put up here is, there's some analytics, but there's a lot of communication happening on this side of the bullets over here. And if your organization is even remotely similar to this, you probably have a lot of that as well too. So we're trying to work with all these folks, trying to provide insights to all these things. We're trying to communicate across all of those things, across all those people. So we use a lot of tools for those things. Now, I came on board earlier this year as kind of the only R person. Like I am still like for not everybody, like I am still a giant believer in R. I love R. If I want to make anything pretty, I make everything pretty in R. If I want to do any hacking or testing or experimenting, it all starts with R. Just because I'm not using it here doesn't mean that I don't still love the R ecosystem. But I came on board to a bunch of folks who don't know R, or at least R isn't even like in their primary set of languages. Like they could probably get around like with like if anyone's familiar with the Monty Python thing, like so they can get around like in a like my hovercraft is full of eels kind of way. But they're not really developed really into R that much. We are primarily a Golang shop. So if anyone, like I think everyone knows what Go is, but Go is a language developed by Google. It is actually really good at creating scalable services. I was going to say secure, but like I'm a Rust person now as well too, so I have to also like, so as much as I will rag on Python as an R person, I will rag on Go as a Rust person. I have to have a nemesis for everything that I have. But Go is a great language. The services it makes are great. We have some incredible, I mean, the talent of the Go programs, they are just phenomenal. We live and die by Jupyter notebooks and a lot of facets of the organization. We also, I mean, not everything fits in a Jupyter notebook, not everything belongs there, even data stuff, right? So there's some random Python scripts or just random scripts in general, as I'll mention. But when I came on, like, I brought with me all my R Markdown talents, even though Quarto is an emerging thing, but I have a lot of R Markdown skills and talents out there. So I bring those in. And if everyone knows me by my blog or the stuff I throw into my GitHub repos, I have a lot of random R scripts. So you bring those in as well too for those things. And I've been over the past couple months experimenting with like the Rust data ecosystem, and there is a Rust data ecosystem, and I will briefly talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. Experimenting with that because I do think Rust is one of those upstarty things that y'all should be keeping on your radar when it comes to doing data work. And that's not just because I like it. I think I have a good handle on where things go, and like this is one of those things where you might want to keep your eye on this one. I am also a purist when it comes to certain things, and we are an AWS shop. I know some of the other team members that I have will gladly use PySpark and PySpark scripts inside Glue. If you like your bank accounts at your organization and you like performance, you will try your best to learn Scala to do your Glue scripting. I mean, if you can afford not to, that's great. But I found in my previous organization, Scala works way better than that inside that Spark environment at AWS, and I much prefer Scala over writing anything in that other language I mentioned. We write a lot of SQL. I mean, I'm sure everyone else on this does too. There's a ton of SQL, and if I guess if organizations aren't treating SQL as a first class language and citizen inside your organization, you really need to rethink that because SQL is still the lingua franca of everything we do. So that's like some of the languagey things that we actually end up doing. We have Jupyter Hub, Jupyter Lab. We have a really cool setup that one of my folks, Matt Lehman, set up. We'll be documenting that, so I'm not going to bore you with that setup. But you can ask me questions after this, and I'll be glad to tell you anything. I'm just not going to with detail here. I talked about this thing called Observable. I love Observable, and I will speak poetically, hopefully, about it in a little bit. But Observable in JavaScript is eating the world. So if you haven't plugged into JavaScript, you really should plug into it at least a little bit and be really familiar with it, at least at that level. I love raw graphs. It's actually a JavaScript thing, but it's a great way to prototype data visualizations if you do not use raw graphs and also support raw graphs. I heartily encourage you to. It is free, but you can also do support for the folks. It's a massive great environment for experimenting. Of course, RStudio. RStudio is never not running on any one of the systems that I have. It is always running. I mean, unless I'm updating it, then like for like a second it's down and then it goes back up. I'm still a big Sublime Text fan because I've just been using that forever, and it's got a rich ecosystem. And Quarto works with it, and Quarto works with RStudio too. I also use like remote things a lot, so I use everything Vim, Vi, however you want to pronounce it in your thing. There's a lot of really cool things with that right now. It's way better than certain things, except Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code. I have to say something nice about Microsoft. I'm sorry about that for anyone that's like me who doesn't like to do that. It's a great ecosystem. The editor is one of the best things for using Rust at. It's also one of the best things for using Quarto at too. So if you're not used to using that, definitely do that. And one reason why I have this slide up is I want you to take a look at this just one more time. So there's Go, and Go does a lot of the crunching part of algorithmic things like API things and stuff like that. But we've got like Jupyter and Python and R, and I'm playing with Rust, and like there's a bunch of languages and SQL. It's like that's a lot already right there that you're trying to accommodate. And then like there's all these other environments that are out there, but especially like Visual Studio Code and just RStudio, just limiting it to those two things. Like if you're just an RStudio shop, you've just like removed like 3/4 of the planet of people that can do like coding work, data work, from being able to work with you. Sure, they can use RStudio. It's a great environment, but they could be like wicked more productive in the thing that they're actually familiar with. So this is one reason why I'm talking about democratizing, because this is a really diverse ecosystem. It's maybe not as diverse as some of the folks out there, but I find this to be really, really diverse. And if we were locked into one thing, I don't think we could get nearly as much done without having the flexibility to do these various things. So all that there equates to what I would call chaos. And so you got pandas, and like I'm not going to follow all of these little lines out to there, but basically, if you don't have a unifying source for all these things, and that could be in a lot of different ways. Like if you're really great with like targets on R, because R can do lots of things, which I'll talk about in a little bit, or make files, or for me, like I'm a big just person, like not like being just and justice. Like there's this tool called Just. It's better than make. It's a lot easier than make. But like if you're used to those kind of things, like I'm sure you could use something like that to frame and wield and kind of do all things out there. But that's a very big system that you've probably set up on your own, and it's custom and it's just all yours. What I really want, and what I saw with the potential, again, when I was git stalking the early parts of Quarto, I saw Quarto as the unifying force for all of these things that you saw, all this spaghetti mess that you see on here. And it isn't just because it supports all the languages out there. My big thing with this, again, is not like, hey, this is how we're going to create an algorithmic pipeline to do X, Y, Z. No, this is how we're going to communicate and document and share and learn and build together within an organization. This is chaos, and Quarto, I believe, gets rid of this chaos if you do it right, and enables you to get a lot of benefits out of that and beyond just like getting rid of chaos. So like if you're doing stuff in the Slack chat, if you have something similar in your org, just drop that in there. So like these folks can let me know if you actually share some of those things. One of my bigger things that I really like am bummed about, like, is this pasted into Google Docs Word Confluence, because I have to tell you, like, dealing with Google Docs, actually, just as an aside for here, like I remember years ago with one of the R Open Sci unconference things, and people were really excited. And I think no one was even working on one of these things too, of trying to get a workflow to go between like R and R Markdown and Google Docs, and like I would still kill for that workflow because Google Docs is just so terrible at reproducibility and doing it's just, I mean, I know there's ways of exporting because I'm following all the Git stalking thing, and I see people who come up with ways of maybe getting Markdown out of there, but getting it back in is going to be hard or whatever. So like this is just a nightmare of being able to organize, control, like to deliver, develop, unify. Like, this is just crazy. So hopefully I'm going to give you ways of getting around that. So we're going to speed up a little bit. So welcome to Quarto. This is just their website. And so you can go there. It's unsurprisingly quarto.org. There's a link in here too in the slides. Hopefully, I think you probably have the link already, so you can go to it. Um, it's it's just amazing, right? So like anyone that was familiar with or is familiar with R Markdown, it's kind of the same thing, right? You can do cool dynamic stuff, you could do cool static stuff, you could do both and diverge and go out there. But like now you're not just limited to R and like a little bit of a hacky way that R worked with Python for a while there. Yes, there were ways of doing more things into there, but it was really like a Gen 1 thing. It was amazing what you could do with R Markdown. And all the folks around with that took all the things that they learned from there and all of the warts and all of the great stuff and said, hey, how can we do this better? And like this, so this isn't just Gen 2 R Markdown. This is like a reimagining of how we're actually going to do this kind of work. So you get to author things however you want to. Do you want to use Vim? Do you want to use NeoVim? Do you want to use VS Code? Do you want to use RStudio or Sublime? Like, what do you want to use? Go for it. You want to use Jupyter Notebook directly? Go for it. Like, so you get to choose whatever you want to use for these things. You're not limited anymore to like one format, one tool, one everything. And you get all the same benefits of it too, right? You actually get to be able to produce those interactive things. And I didn't put it in the presentation because like I really did want to just a quick add something onto here. But if you haven't seen the announcement this week about like the ability to just throw up a Shiny app within like a Quarto doc output, and like I'm going to say it's amazing because right now they only have the Python part working. It's basically a WASM, and if you don't know what that is, we can talk offline. But it's a WASM to Python backend for Shiny inside the document, creating this opens up so many possibilities, and the R stuff is coming really quick. George is amazing. But there's lots of stuff we can do. So like this, like I'm setting it up, and hopefully you'll have a good experience with this as we keep going. So why is it called Quarto? And if you haven't watched Tom Mock's, if you haven't watched his tutorial or his RStudioConf talks, there's a link to things that have linked to that on there later. So like I tried making an aggregator versus like go link crazy. That's a must read. That is a must watch. There's as much that you have to do that. I call him one of the Quarto deities on Twitter because he's just so knowledgeable about this, and he's just a great person to follow and just ask questions. And if he doesn't know the answer, he finds the answer. Quarto is named after an actual document format that kind of appeared back in the 1400s. It was literally how you would print out something onto like the typeset press back in the day so that you could fold it into booklets. And Gutenberg actually created booklets and newsletters, or however you want to phrase it, like stuff that you could just like hand out with the Quarto format before he even did like the Gutenberg Bible. So they were democratizing knowledge with the offset press and with this format way back then. And this caused like an amazing change. Like this just changed everything. I won't say this booklet only changed everything, but this was a huge catalyst for it. I'm a big believer, like I'm a huge fan of the old Connection series, if anyone's ever like seen the James Burke series. I believe this was a catalyst for tons of things. He doesn't talk about it directly in that series, but I think this did, and if I could trace it, it would change everything I found there. And I want Quarto, I want you to use this Quarto that we're talking about now to do the exact same thing. So what are the sweet spots that I'm going to talk that we're going to like breeze through, but like basically give you a taste of this tonight. So Quarto's organizational sweet spot number one is documentation. I hate documentation. My team will if you were to ask them, like if we ever have like an ask me anything, whatever, they'll let you know I actually hate documentation. Like I don't mind writing, but writing for the point of like doing documentation just sometimes it just gets to me. Quarto actually makes documenting things fun because you can actually make really cool documentation that isn't just boring words, but interactive stuff and draw people in and link people around and change things up. And like this is really neat. And it's a way you can unify all the documentation in your organization. So if someone wants to write docs for something and they want to use Python code to do that, let them write the Python code for it. Or if they want to use R or even something else to plug into there because it's super pluginable, you can actually. So I think Quarto could be the way you unify at least the data science part of documentation at your organization, if not all the other ones out there. I think the secondary sweet spot, which is different than just documentation, is communication. I think a lot of data science teams, and I think research bears me out on this one, fail because they don't capture the imagination of the organization. They don't communicate in the language they need to the organization. They don't make their stuff look cool. They just, to be honest about it, sometimes being able to have that communication and regularly tell people what's happening and regularly encourage folks to interact with you and make things look compelling and have them look like everything else in your org's brand and everything is great. So communication is a huge part of the Quarto ecosystem to me. So hopefully, as we talk about things and as I'm doing this, like you can see how that actually goes into there. I think style is also an unheralded thing in a lot of places because I mean honestly, like unless you've seen someone who masters like the Python data visualization, like any like basic Python data visualization kind of looks as bad as anyone's first ggplot2 that back in the day used like the basic gray background and didn't have any styling. And it's great, and it is great. Like your first ggplot2 is amazing. Whoever creates one, if you're just new to this and it's amazing. It just isn't going to look like the bestest thing on the planet out there because until you get better at it. Quarto encourages emphasis on style. That's another reason why I liked it a lot better over like where our markdown had ended up being. Like the styling part was sort of an after effect on there. This is a first thing, like this is a first principle thing for Quarto. Like actually designing upfront with modern standards around style is all about this, what happens there. So again, I'm not doing a technical talk on this, but it basically uses a version of CSS that is sort of a meta version. It's called SCSS. And you basically get to define styles. And you know what that means? You get to work with all the designers or branders in your organization who know this stuff like crazy. I work with some of like the most amazing designers who think things and build things and can just imagine things that I can't even begin to. And their sense of style is just incredible. And I get to just riff off of that. I get to make my stuff look great because they make stuff look great just by the way they design things. So you get to tap into that knowledge, and then you actually learn a skill set as a result of that too, that just empowers you and gives you significant more capability within doing it on your own. And then I think the final one is reproducibility. And I think this is a problem in a lot of shops. Maybe you've solved it on yours. I don't think we've solved it on ours because environments are hard to maintain. Actually getting to the point where you can actually make things work on someone else's system is better than it used to be, but it's still not great sometimes. So one thing that, especially if you focus on the documentation side and organizing everything Getter side, reproducibility is really paramount in this because and I will talk a bit more, but basically if you want to be able to uniformly deploy a bunch of documentation or gather everyone around to put all their stuff into one place and generate stuff on the fly so you can navigate around to it, it's got to be reproducible. And there's baby steps to get there, but the reality is if it's not going to work. So this is a great way to force the environments to actually work together and to make things work pretty well. All right, so how does it do all this? Like, how is Quarto so magical? Like, exactly what alchemy, did all the folks, that were formerly in R Markdown and now in this, and all the new ones that have come on, what have they done like to make this actually work? So it's got batteries included. So there's first class citizens, R, Python, and Julia, and also observable and JavaScript. And if again, like you may not know what that is, which is what the Watt's for, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. Not too much more detail though, because I try to keep this like really code light. Those are all first class citizens in here. And eventually you could do the same thing in our Markdown, like I said before, but these are like first class, like 100% first class citizens now. There is nothing between them that is not shareable. But I'm also lying. I try not to lie too much, but I'm lying to you because R and Python, I guess Julia too, but R JavaScript to a lesser degree, but R and Python, especially Julia as well, they have built-in extensibility. So I will focus more on what I love and care about more, which is R. I mean, you could use JavaScript via V8, and like the new version of the V8 compatibility that Jeroen's put in there, like you can do amazing things with that in R right now. Our Java, what Simon started and is still keeping going and pumping along despite Oracle and Apple's best efforts to kill Java for whatever reason. Like that's still powerful, and there's still so much things you can tap into on there. And reticulate, you can basically like not have to touch IkiPython and just use it from R, and it then doesn't feel so bad. So I guess I'm still a bit opinionated, like I said before. But that's all. And there's, I mean, like that's a bare minimum of the things you can do from R with other languages. And again, Python does the same thing too. So I'm lying because you get to tap into all those ecosystems with just those primary citizens out there. And it actually goes way beyond that. So here's where you might want to, if you're not sitting down again, you might want to sit down. Because you don't have to rely just on R's knitter engine, which is how our Markdown documents used to have to get data and pass data through and make all the code work and all the things output right. You get to use like the Jupyter kernel ecosystem to be able to do that. And like this is, I mean, so this is a an observable JavaScript entity that I created on here, and I'll show you how. I will actually show you, not directly, but I will give you an indication of how I brought it into here. So it's an interactive visualization inside the actual thing in the Real.js presentation from Quarto. These aren't just like, I just scaled them because I wanted to have some bigger than the other. So there's no reason for the scaling except I was opinionated. But like, these is like 148, I think was the last count, Jupyter kernels. Which means that like you have that entire, and like this, you can see like you got PHP, you got Go, you've got OCaml, which is actually a pretty cool language. There's a whole bunch of other things that you can tap into. So if you have folks that know these other languages and can figure out how to work with data in those languages or have been working with data, I mean, you've now just democratized the access to that because you can do all that with Quarto just by switching from knitter to doing that inside anything you do with Quarto. It's kind of incredible. It's kind of amazing, especially since I got Rust working with it too. So it's really great. Like there's just so many things you can do with that. To extend the capabilities and do that democratization that I was talking about before. So this is one reason why I did start off with that democratization. I don't think, and actually it's not really hard to make a Jupyter kernel. It's not like super straightforward. You have to read a lot and, trial and error. But once you do that, like once you follow the rules, it isn't that difficult to do. And that means any language that comes out, you could do that for, and bam, now you can do data work inside that language because it has access to all the objects that you can put into there. This is phenomenal. Like this is unheard of, like the ability to do this before. Like I don't think I know of any other thing before Quarto that would give you the ability to do all this with a focus on communication, unifying documents, putting all things together, communication. I just don't think it's existed before. This is kind of amazing. So observable. So yes, now that I've said some nice things about Jupyter and Python, I have to actually let's palette cleanse and move on. So observable is one of the things I also love right now. This is it's like the I will call it the commercial extension to D3, even though it's really not, because you can just use observable stuff without actually paying for anything. So it's sort of commercial, like they're actually trying to make some money off of it. I think they should, because I think they developed a really good thing. So if you go to observablehq.com, because they couldn't get observable because the main squatters, it basically lets you experiment with cool JavaScript, but actually not even just JavaScript, because thanks to this thing called WebAssembly or WASM, you can experiment with almost anything inside here too. So it's almost as rich as the Quarto ecosystem, but it's kind of locked into the browser, and we won't go into the details here. But if you ever wanted to play with D3, if you ever wanted to play with JavaScript, and you wanted to a worry-free, crash-free, destruction-free environment, go to Observable, sign up, get an account, it's free, play with stuff on there, because like you get to learn and play with a lot of things that are actually out there, and work with all of the observable notebooks that everyone's already made before. And when I saw I saw this emerge into the repo, as I've been, again, I get stalked like 300 or 400 people. When I saw they had this, like my eyes like literally lit up when I actually saw it, because like, oh my gosh, like did they make it easy to embed observable things somewhere and work with JavaScript code inside other places? And like the answer is yes. So like and as an example on here, and I'm not going to go into details on here, but like what's on the left is one of the quintessential D3 interactive Sankey diagram examples. And if you were to go to that URL that you can barely see on there, but I got links to this later, so don't worry about it. You could go in there and play with all that stuff on there and deal with all that on there, but it's still like in there, and you could embed it with a really like kind of, I hate to say this because it's a really good ecosystem, but it's like a jury-rigged way of embedding this stuff into your website before, or just using that code before. What Observable gave us, or what Quarto has given us, is the ability to just write code as you would write your R code in a Markdown document, or Python code in a notebook or a Markdown document or whatever. And when I saw that, like I spent like maybe 2 months copying and pasting stuff out of my private observable notebooks into stuff to play with. And I just got sick of doing it, to be honest with everybody. Like, and I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be able to play with observable things inside this environment, which is a lot more friendly to me, and do that. So this is just a plug for a free Chrome extension, which means any observable notebook that you see out there, and this is basically 2 screenshots. This is the only code I think in here. You basically get a zip file that works immediately with Quarto. So what you see on that right side is the version of it's Visual Studio Code that is just running and compiled that, and now it's a completely interactive thing. You could do the exact same thing, works completely local on your system, and now you can extend that locally and do some cool stuff. And I've got some links later as well too. So what makes this super powerful, and what makes me continue this, hey, let's democratize things, let's build multi-language features into here. I am way better at R code than I am at JavaScript code. Maybe from like a data crunching perspective anyway, like I am leagues better at doing that. And so one of my fave things to do now is to do a lot of data work in R, grab whatever data I'm working with in R, get it into a form that works really, really well with Observable, and then do all of that work inside Quarto and tweak and experiment and play, and then publish. And I get everything published on here. And just to go back, like that's what this is. Like I basically made this in an Observable notebook. I clicked that button that I just showed you. I brought the code down, and I literally copy pasted the code into the Quarto Reveal.js thing, and it basically gave me an interactive word cloud on here. Like that's how simple this is to actually kind of go do, and that's how it just works. That's how well they thought of everything together. This actually is the most friendly way that you can take Observable and bring it to your website, or bring it to your brand site, or bring it into however you want to actually show those things. And if you go through Observable and like click around, like the amount of like, hey, just here's some really cool code that does this amazing thing. Like go click it, clone it, put it into here, and now you just get to shove data into it, and it just works. So it's even a little bit nicer than the HTML widget ecosystem, which it works great. I have zero against HTML widgets. I still use them. But this actually gives you the power beyond that, because you don't have to have everything conform into it, and you're not logged into R or even Python, because Python's got the same kind of widgets out there too. So we're 4 slides till the end. So reproducibility. I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but basically my suggestion to here, and I'm going to give you like a plan for how you should attack Quarto and how you should bring it into your organization, because it's how I've been doing it. The Quarto is this great thing, because while you've got all these GUI environments and IDEs and everything, fundamentally you just can go to the command line and do Quarto render, and you can do Quarto render of a single document. You can do Quarto render of an entire website, an entire book, or a presentation, as I just did it, or all of the above if you've got the project set up correctly. Quarto render will render everything. So if there's Python notebooks in there, it will do that. If there's code in Python or whatever inside like a particular QMD document, it will do it into there. So by actually making it so that you have to code or render thing to have the documentation look right or be right or stand up right or go whatever, this is the ultimate test for reproducibility. Like, just are you brave enough to put all your code into one repo, like one documentation repo, do code or render without doing something which called freezing, which I'll mention in a minute. Are you brave enough? Is that going to work in your environment? This encourages you to actually go do this. So this encourages you to have reproducibility and the setups for all of the folks in your organization, to all the servers in your organization, bring all that tooling that people are using and from that diversity that I talked about into one particular space. Quarto render is the ultimate reproducibility test for me for something is like, let's say, a large multi-language, multi-tool documentation project. And this is the Quarto render challenge for all of you that have like multi-tool environments. If you can do that, you're well on your way to having reproducibility. All right, so I gave you a bunch of like goals at the beginning. We walked through a bunch of things now on here. I've talked a lot about the things about showing a lot of code. Sorry, you can look at the presentation, there's lots of code in the presentation. What's the value proposition again? So I'm not just going to take the four things to the beginning and put it up, but I'm going to give you a couple of different ones. Quarto is access to language agnostic, completely language agnostic, especially with Arrow. So I didn't want to turn this into an Arrow talk. If you haven't poked at Arrow, if you have not poked at the Arrow project, all I'm going to say is poke at the Arrow project. You'll be left behind if you don't. So because Arrow is the one that's going to enable a lot of it is enabling and will continue to enable a lot of this. Access to language agnostic, cutting edge data analysis and visualization tools. There will be maybe a week's delay from the next coolest thing that someone makes out there to being usable inside Quarto in some way, shape, or form. This is going to be the experimentation and delivery platform of its present, but also the future. The thing that I think maybe like about it more than anything else is like I get to tap into really smart people that can make things beautiful by giving me all the designs and styles and sets, and then I just have to apply them. So it's uniform styling across any documentation website, any publicly facing website, any tool application website out there, documents, presentations, everything that's out there. This actual shell of a presentation that I'm using here is a template that I put up. I have a link to it in here that anyone can use, that you can modify for your own organization and build upon it for those same rules that are out there. That uniformity makes people want to dive in because everything looks similar and it looks as beautiful as the other things they're used to. And if you've done your best to make the text accessible and the explanations accessible and the visualizations accessible, you've just brought people into your data science ecosystem in a way that you haven't been able to do before. I already just talked about reproducibility. I think this is like the ultimate reproducibility tester for organizations. I think this adaptability is not thought of as much as it probably should be right now. But this is basically like, this is mobile, this is web, this is pad, this is VR. Like, this is like, it's not just adaptable to that platform, but it's adaptable to interactive, into static, because I'm about to render this into PDFs to give to the NYCR folks as well. I know you're not just the R folks anymore, the hackers, gotcha. But this is amazing. Like, you have choices, you can do really great things and have output in ways that you really had never had before, even in the R Markdown ecosystem, because the tooling is a little bit safer, a little bit easier to use, and a little bit like more guaranteed to the outputs that you're going to get when you do that. And you'll get fame and fortune. I'm not as good with Reveal.js, so I was going to put a little thing at the bottom that says fame and fortune not guaranteed, but that's your mileage may vary with that one on there. So where are you going to start with all these things as we come to a close? Well, I already said it, but you got to go to quarto.org, digest every single thing there. It's not huge. There's not a vast amount of information, and I would suggest doing it as you need to learn a particular thing. So if you want to make interesting presentations in a nice, accessible JavaScript framework that also like will produce great PDF content, etc., maybe start with there. If you want to just see how you can switch over your R Markdowns or your Python notebooks, maybe take that track on there. You can kind of design your own courses you want to do on the Quarto website. I cannot pronounce the name. Like I'm going to say Michael because I'm just going to pronounce the name. It's probably Mikhail. The awesome Quarto, that's a link so you can go to it. It's a GitHub repo, but it's also just an amazing collection of resources. Every single new thing, he catches things before I do. That's saying a lot, people. Like, he catches things before I do. That's amazing. You need to go there. I don't know how he does it. I hope people just keep submitting all the cool stuff that you make on there. All of Thomas's and lots of the other RStudio work is in there, of the presentation tutorials. It's just phenomenal resources. So many creative people doing so much creative, amazing work to help other folks dive into this ecosystem. get up cozy, like have coffee time, virtual or otherwise, with your design folks at work. I'm sure most orgs have some sort of designer, whether it's outsourced or insourced or however you do it. They will level up your communication skills because they know how to make things beautiful. And even you might too. I've seen so many amazing folks that just knew R are now like CSS and SCSS and JavaScript experts. It's just amazing seeing that progression for folks, way better than I am at those things. I'm relying heavily on my awesome team at work to kind of give me these great things. I would argue creating a website would be a great thing to start with, like to build up some muscle. I've done that internally. I've not done that externally yet. I will probably do that at some point. And then there's this thing called freezing content. So building a website's really scary because Quarto render, like it requires reproducibility. And if you have multiple things coming into there, reproducing the whole thing, initially it's going to break for a while. Like you're not going to get reproducibility out of the gate. So the way I've been trying to do this in our setup that we're like just getting off the ground at work, is we're freezing all the content that each individual person generates with their own individual tooling. Eventually I'm going to go like, that's it. We're going to Quarto render and like closing my eyes and hope it actually works. Freezing content lets you basically like let the person on their machine make everything work. You just generate content and just serve up the content via a web server. It's a really nice happy medium between doing all that. Plus it also has some performance benefits, especially if you're one of those folks that uses GitHub Actions. Don't use GitHub Actions. Then you're going to want to learn Rocker. So that's like the Docker ecosystem for R, but it isn't just for R. I think of it as the data science ecosystem because once you have Rocker and you get some of the fundamentals working within that for just standing up various stuff relating to Quarto, you should read about extending Docker. So these are all links, and this is one of the better links is from the Carpentries for how to extend Docker, because you're going to want to add in all the things that work for everybody else. So you can make a reproducible environment with these things and then generate the stuff via that reproducible environment. So you're building your skill sets here if you already aren't. I know a lot of our folks have already been, and Python folks and etc. have been doing this already, but this is a kind of a great learning path for doing things. Like that's the progression that I'd like to recommend for folks to actually go do. And then I've got some resources for folks as well too. I'm going to tap through them all. Actually I'm not. So the first one, I have to update this one. So like buyer beware. I like staying really current on RStudio. I'm sort of like really obsessed with it. And I also like, as a result of that, need to stay really current with Quarto because they kind of go hand in hand. I haven't updated this. There's a new version of Quarto. There's a preview release that you need to do some cool features. I have not updated that into the installer yet, but if you want to keep your Electron-based RStudio for Macs and Quarto all up to date at the same time, run that every day, and you'll get a pristine version of that every day. And it's smart enough to know if you've got the latest version of everything too, so it won't do that. The Quarto organization template is literally this template that you can customize with like actual decent instructions. No one's told me they weren't to do that. The next three things are just examples of how you kind of just maybe bring R data in or use R to do data system work and then pass stuff over to Observable. A couple of different things on there to be able to go do that. If you want to actually, that fourth link, if you're in the US and you want to keep track of how, I won't be political, I promise. I won't. See, if you want to keep track of the elections in November, you can do that with that fourth one. The one down from there, it's something that I kind of do every year, almost every year for our folks, is I regenerate the foliage map in R with like using animation. This is a version of it that actually uses R for the data grabbing and then uses Observable to kind of get the rest of it. And that bottom one is if you don't want to actually install a Chrome extension, because you should all be very careful and never install Chrome extensions if you can all avoid it. That's a Rust-based command line tool that you point at any Observable notebook and will do the exact same thing that the extension does if you want to be able to siphon off all that cool things and look at the cool JavaScript code that people have written to help you make cool stuff. So this is Ask Me Anything time. So whatever you've typed in or still want to type in from on there, the source is there, but you probably already have a link to all those things. And that's a QR code for that. It's safe. I will tell you if I'm going to compromise you. I promise I will tell you do that. That's a QR code generated with Python at the very end of the document. So again, if you haven't all died from the fact that I've now used Python multiple times in this document, I guess you're still going to be reading for this one. But with that, I'm going to stop my share.
Before I jump in, first round of applause for Bob. Thank you so much. We have a bunch of questions. I'm going to jump in and ask them. I'm going to roll up some of the ones that we had early on. How does Quarto connect with, and I'll summarize, like in a sense, non-coder tools for communicating through things like Slack or Office or SharePoint or sort of other ecosystems that are not data ecosystems for organizations?
Actually, that's a really good question. So I will weave my way through what you just said. So, uh, depending on so I don't know how you want to communicate in Slack. I am so thankful that some other folks took the burden of Slack R off of me. So if you're using Slack R, other people who have it now, they're doing amazing work with it. But that's just a connector to kind of go do things. And like most people communicate in Slack via bots, or you're going to post something manually, physically into there. So a couple of things about that. One thing I despise about Slack, I mean, see, I'm opinionated, is the fact that like if you drop in HTML in Slack, rightfully so, because you're running a horrible Electron browser inside Slack for most people, or you're running a browser. By giving you an HTML, like bad things could happen when you just run untrusted HTML because it's running a bunch of other stuff inside there. So it doesn't render HTML. You can't do interactive HTML inside Slack. That's great. I'm glad they did it that way. So all the interactive stuff that I was explaining to you, even that like the very simple observable word cloud I did won't work in Slack. So that functionality you're just not going to get in Slack. But there literally is nothing stopping you from having something that uses Quarto to render a document into like PDF, because actually there's a pretty decent PDF viewer in like, because they use one of the open source JavaScript PDF viewers inside Slack to be able to do that, or a Word doc or something like that to put it into there. Or you could use something that actually generates like a workflow where you generate a really awesome, beautiful document in Quarto, generate a docx and have like one of the amazing R or Python systems that drop stuff into Google Sheets or whatever other ecosystem you do cloud stuff in, post those links into there as well too. So Quarto itself isn't going to get you that. Quarto is the communication mechanism and the beautiful things. It's going to get you the ability to make the beautiful stuff for there. But I will also argue you could also have a website that you build with Quarto and drop the links into the Slack with those, because Quarto is also smart enough. Like these folks are amazing. Like it does all the open graph tags. Like one of my, as everyone that I've ever worked with will be glad to let you know, I have my biggest pet peeve is no unfurling open graph tags in Slack. Like I will literally scream like in the house when that happens. But it does that. You have open graph tags in there. So like it actually will make things look pretty into there. So I think that's how you tie stuff into there. And the same goes for SharePoint, right? You can actually create Word docs that SharePoint will render and index pretty well. But you can also throw a PDF in the SharePoint as well too. I mean, you should really try to get your orgs never to use SharePoint. It's a terrible thing. It's really insecure. It's just horrible. I mean, I know you also have no ability to do that because the org has been using it forever and they buy steak dinners for all the team managers. But again, the content you create can be used and pushed up to there, and there's connectors in every language that you can use to push stuff content out. So I would say like work it from there. Like get really good at making the design and everything beautiful and the documents beautiful, where you can make interactive stuff, where you can't make static, and use that as a publishing mechanism for those things.
All right. Let's get a question from the Slack here. Question from Miles McBain. So what do you think about Lua being the standard language for writing Quarto extensions?
So as someone who's been in cyber and other things for a long time, like Lua is a big friend of folks in cyber. So I love Lua. I used to have something on CRAN called Splash R, which was a alternative to R Selenium for doing JavaScript enabled web scraping, and a package I relied on died, and because CRAN's CRAN, like everything that went with it died. So it's not there anymore. Like the way you scripted that was with Lua and not JavaScript. And like back in the day, I was a way better Lua scripter than I am a JavaScripter, or was a JavaScripter. So I think that Lua is really nice. It's also probably a little safer in certain aspects than other languages they actually could have used for that. And it's also the scripting language. And one reason why I love it, like Miles, it's the scripting language for most gaming platforms. And what I want to get is because like I can say this because I am not one. I want to get all the younger people who are still coming into this and are enamored with the gaming scene, but then work in that brutal industry for a while and want to escape it. I know it's because my daughter does gaming program. But they will know Lua because it powers like so many games out there. Like, so they come with firsthand like Lua knowledge that will put all of us in the hope, I think pretty much in this channel to shame. So you get to bring them on board and help with those things too. So it really is like a great level setter. I mean, and come on, like this, like one of my newsletters talked about how amazing Lua was too. So you should really go read that if you haven't. So I think it's great, and I think it's flexible. I think it's extendable. I think it's a low memory footprint. But I'm more happy, like I just said, because it has the ability to bring way more people into our ecosystem than it did before.
I will say I have talked to JJ a little bit about this, and they're not completely against the idea of opening up the ability to sort of use one of the general scripting languages, but one of the to build extensions. But one of the main reasons they want it is for that reproducibility thing, because with Lua it's embeddable and it can travel and with the whole system, Lua. But if you do this, then if the extensions are in one of the many languages that Quarto supports, then that needs to be the language that people are running in order to run the Quarto extensions. So,
yeah, I mean, I would argue, I would argue that if I were like, I don't contribute to Quarto like at all for lots and lots of reasons, mostly his time. I would argue if there's an extension at all to how you do what they're going to support for to add that capability that Lua provides for folks that don't know this, just really quick. So Lua lets you create pandoc filters, but other things as well too inside this Quarto ecosystem. Pandoc is still like, I love Pandoc because like all the Haskell people love it too, because like it's the biggest pwn of the century. Pandoc is written in Haskell. Everyone runs more Haskell code than you even knew you were running before. Like Haskell like owns everything. I just love how they did that to everybody. But that's how you like write those filters in there. What I'd rather see is a WASI, which is a WebAssembly systems interface to Pandoc, so that I could write Rust and have it go to WASM, and I could write R and go to WASM, because you can write R and go to WASM now, guys. It's great. George is amazing. Python, like all this, like, so like I think that is the level setter, and I'd rather see anything private, anything else is gonna be doing extension-y things into, because you can compile Lua to WASM as well too. So anyway, I will get off my WASM high horse. So like I love Lua. I'd even love it better if they had a WASI interface to it.
okay, question for someone else, and these gone into some other areas. So someone was asking, what's a good introduction to CSS or Bootstrap for those of us who are trying to learn how to tweak themes and styling in Quarto?
Well, you're not gonna want to hear this. View source. I'm really sad. I'm sorry. So I guess that's a little bit cheating, because like that's kind of what I've been viewing source for probably 14, 15 years longer than everybody else here has. So like that doesn't count, because like I've had 14, 15 years to view source, and you only have like a year or a day. I don't have off the top of my head a resource, but I do have incredible resources at my day job who are more brilliant and do things with this so well. So I will get them to give me a list of that, but I will also then cheat and say, like, I will put it in my newsletter next week. So you can have to go to there to get the information for there, just to cheat and get some more signups to the newsletter.
We can
Yeah.
also cheat and say, if that we have a lot of people here who probably know a little bit about themselves.
Yeah.
Somebody else doesn't answer, please drop it in the chat.
Yeah, seriously, guys, like that's folks, that's like I'm actually deliberately trying to not say guys anymore. I'm usually gonna say folks. You like go to that list, the awesome Quarto list, read a bunch of the blogs, because some folks on there didn't know a thing about SCSS before, and they got into Quarto and they started reading everything, and like they make some of the most beautiful things, and they became experts in this stuff. Like it clicked with them. So read some of those resources there too, because I've just been amazed at what people have been creating with this and how quickly they pick some of that stuff up. So they're also probably good resources to go to see maybe what their mental model was, to kind of, because really it's adapting that mental model around how SCSS works and then how CSS works. Thankfully, if you're just getting into it now, CSS and SCSS makes a lot more sense now than it did 5, 8 years ago. It's a way more, like, the mental model is almost solidified to the point where I think almost anyone can pick it up.
Okay. Here's a question about Observable and Quarto. So what did you mean that, and I'm trying to remember specifically where this was, where you say about setting up the data in the right way to load into Observable.
Oh yeah, that's great. So there's so I will focus on R, because why wouldn't you? I think I'm pretty good at data manipulation in our data, getting in our massaging on there. We love data frames in our, like, I think if I were to ask everyone in this call, like, we all love data frames, like we live and die by the tabular format. And like our mental models of how things work with data frames in R and even in pandas or whatever, they're way different than what that format looks like when you throw it to JavaScript. So like when you serialize a data frame, let's say with I for the folks on R, JSON Lite, you serialize it into there one of two different ways. One is an array of objects, and one is just like a stream of objects that kind of get put out to there. Almost nothing in JavaScript likes that. Like almost nothing in JavaScript likes that format that I just set onto there. They actually have a way of naming objects and ways of using object keys and values to make things more accessible and more performant inside the JavaScript ecosystem. So what they did, and like I think this, like I think I remember reading or someone was saying it wasn't an afterthought, but they're like, yeah, let's make a couple of extra functions that people could use to call from JavaScript to transform these things. So this existed in HTML widgets before, but it's now on steroids inside of this ecosystem. So what you can do is when you have, like, say, an R chunk, do some stuff with data. You have that data in R, you say push, there's a command, there's like basically a function you call that will say make this available to Observable. In Observable, you say, give me this thing, and it makes it available in Observable. And they say this other thing, transform it into something that JavaScript will understand, because JavaScript's kind of daft sometimes. So it's literally like two things you run, and it immediately transfers that data over, makes it available inside inside the output for the of the notebook, and transforms it into something that most of the things that you can plug into with D3 will just operate on immediately. Obviously, you need to know what the names of things are, whatever. So it's really straightforward to go through those things. And one of like two of the notebooks in that links that I provided are on there. They show you how to actually go do that, because like that was the bee's knees to me. Like I literally I hoot and holler a lot. I mean, I'm home alone, so no one really hears me. So like I was so excited when I saw that and that worked, and I use it all the time now. So, and if you have any problems or need more questions, I mean, I am on Twitter over constantly, so like you should hit me up there and I'll be glad to help.
Okay, here's a great, very Bob question. Why did you say not to use GitHub Actions?
I hate Microsoft with the passion and a fire that I can't contain sometimes. That's pretty much, and like it's just a way of making Microsoft more money in the long run, because they're going to tell you at some point you can't run this because you ran out of credits, and then you're going to buy it's I don't like the lot. So like I will take this offline. I have to say it's one of my opinions. I don't like uniform locked-in ecosystems. I don't like the fact that GitHub has pretty much become the de facto social coding service out there. Yes, I know other ones exist. With 90 million daily users, I think is what they said they get now, which is just terrifying. So yeah, I just don't like it. I have reverted to only doing stuff on GitHub because I'm busy. Life is really busy. I've got a wonderful grandchild now. So like I've given in, but if you can at all not give in to that and try to keep doing stuff in different ways, please do. I just don't like Microsoft, and GitHub Actions are not always safe. If you look, there have been a number of security issues with them. People have found holes into them, and now they're primarily used to do coin mining, which is great because we need more cryptocurrency mining out there. So I just don't like them, period. It's me, use them. There's lots of great documentation. The RStudio fam does an amazing job of showing how to use them, have a lot of great ones out there. If it will save you time and save you trouble and not make you wring your hair out, which I don't think it does, because I hear people complaining about them all the time when it comes to some of these things, especially Quarto. Maybe don't, but like I'm just not a big fan of it.
Okay, I knew that would set you off.
That's not fair.
Right. Another question, a question related to a little bit to security, which is I wonder if you could give a little more detail about like how you have set up using Quarto within your organization. One of the questions is how you set it up in terms of what's your approach in terms of access and security and auth and the link to that, but also like what's the to the extent that you have on the system that like you got some people on to use Quarto.
Yeah, so I am still dragging, kicking, and screaming Python people to actually, that's entirely not true. The one person that I have to convince has been on paternity leave, so I can't really convince someone that's been on paternity leave to go do something except handle a beautiful little baby. So that's the one thing there. And we are. I'm gonna limit this, and if Matt's on, I'm sorry, Matt. We are a Kubernetes shop, for better or for worse. So we have Kubernetified. I have no idea what the word is for that. But we have cated, whatever, that the setup on there. And so right now we're in that baby step stage, which is one reason why I showed you the baby step thing. So it's a this works on Bob's computer, so Bob's going to do the render, and we're going to just have content that displays via an Nginx web server that goes onto there because that's how it works. And I know that when the other folks get a chance to get into it, it's going to work fine on there as well too. It's also the least resource intensive because like I don't have to spend a lot of money because it's a budget thing. I have to pay for the stuff we use at work. So I don't have to spend a lot of money on the Kubernetes environment or beefing that up to kind of make sure it can do all that sorts of things when I've got literally like a Mac Studio that sits unused half the day sometimes. So like I'd rather use the local compute resources and do that out to there. The eventual goal though is to do exactly what you indicated. What I was saying is have folks make sure everybody can reproduce things on their own environment, but actually have that Dockerized environment, which will do that whole make thing. And we will freeze content because it makes sense from a time and savings and everything standpoint. But every so often, we should be running things to make sure we can reproduce everything we do from the comms standpoint, just like we do from the API and MLOps standpoint on the other side of the house as well too. Secondarily, like so, I've been on a tear to have like local PyPy, and there's some really new cool stuff that I'll be hopefully trying out tomorrow and also putting in the newsletter about. So I will do something in the newsletter for R. I don't just ignore it. I try if I start doing R in the newsletter, Norm, I said Norm on Twitter. That's why I said it. If I start doing R in the newsletter, it's just going to take it over. So I have to I have to be careful how often I put R in the newsletter. But there's a great new thing that lets you do secure R repos with like all sorts of great stuff around it. And if it works great, I'll be blathering about it to everybody. I want both of those things set up so that we have both secure sourcing of the packages that we actually use for both R and Python, whatever. And then being able to kind of do, and so for as an auth that you said, so we do every single thing. So nothing we have is secret from the rest of the company that we do in like at all. Like there's nothing secret except personnel things. So everything, we're like a radical transparency organization. So all that stuff exists on you have to exist over the VPN. You have to be VPN'd in fully with that to be able to see any of the content that we actually render on those things. So there's nothing public about anything that we actually go do. For this stuff, there doesn't need to be any auth. I see that happening down the road. And there was a great discussion on Twitter this week about maybe using Shiny Proxy to handle some of the auth stuff. So I will definitely be blathering more about that once we actually set those kind of things up. But watch that thread that I was in. I think Miles was in it too earlier this week.
Yeah. Little question outside Quarto. One question is, what's your system for collecting and organizing and then publishing all of the links and tools that you put in your newsletter almost every day and as well as your blog every week?
I use Feedly did something that I will not talk about. That I don't use Feedly anymore, and I don't encourage people to use Feedly. I do use InnoReader now, and I love InnoReader. There's a free tier, there's a paid tier. I use the paid tier because I use a lot more of the features than people that don't use that. So I use InnoReader religiously with a lot of connections. I probably go through 30,000 articles a day in InnoReader. So like I do a lot of sifting, I do a lot of reading, and I do a lot of whatever. Like I don't read every single one of the 30,000 things. I use that in conjunction with another thing called raindrop.io. Yeah, I love raindrop.io. It is just a beautiful service. It is a beautiful utility. It's just phenomenal. I've even wired up so you can wire up everything to it. I just wired up Twitter faves to it, so I actually get to have those resources available there too. All that together in combination with Visual Studio Code and a bunch of extensions, and then also Roam Research. I use Roam. I find that to be more usable than everything else, and I just don't want to deal with Obsidian. Like I love Obsidian, but Roam, I don't have to do anything; it just works. So so all those things together let me have an understanding. It's like sometimes some days are better than others. Sometimes I have a really good theme and a good thing. Sometimes I'm in a random mood, so I'll pick random things. That kind of goes out there, but I'm pretty much constantly watching everything. And one reason for that, it's not just because it's whatever, like in cyber, like I have to be watching for any of the latest things that pop up. There's another person at work that does it even better than I do. And like he's even maybe a bit more insane than I am. But like kind of the same thing, just constantly monitoring everything. It's a residual effect from cyber stuff, but it also the impact that I get to keep up with a lot of the tech stuff.
Let me ask my question about it, which is a big question about Quarto, which is sort of Quarto in another organizational environment.
Okay.
So you made a great case for why Quarto brings all of these other people into the ecosystem who come into because they have experience with Python or Lua or Rust, and they come from other places in tech. But a lot of our users come into R where R being is the only coding they do. right?
You're gonna say Excel. I say you're gonna say Excel,
No,
aren't
no,
you?
they're
Yeah.
not even that,
Okay.
or not even Excel, but they're right. They might be Excel users. R is the only coding you do because most of what they do isn't coding at all, and they've
Yeah.
like worked really hard so that they can make the graph for the one thing they do, which is otherwise going out and counting snakes in a forest and and making the graph, and they've learned that ggplot, and they've learned that R markdown, and that they've gotten that far, right? And that's an important thing. And then you say, well, let's go install and let's change to the next thing instead, right? So from the perspective of someone who's in a sense just the R user and not in a tech organization necessarily, like what is
Right.
Quarto? What is the new things that Quarto brings people that they might not, have thought, and that makes it worth the cost of installing the new thing where where it's a much higher barrier to installing the new thing and set up a new thing than people who always try a new tool.
Yeah, that's I'm going to background process it while I say a couple of things around that. So like I sometimes take it for there's things on my wrist. One of the things on my wrist is this thing called, and like I'm not like it's one of the tracker devices. I won't mention the names on here, but you can probably see what it is if anyone knows what it is. I have this for lots of reasons because one, like I for a long time, like I just didn't actually really sleep. So that's one thing that initially enabled me to keep up with a lot of things that are out there. But I actually use this to sleep just enough that I need to be able to stay and kind of basically. So I can't tell everyone to kind of, well, yeah, just like drink a lot of caffeine, but then also get the right amount of sleep so your body's healthy. But then also just kind of nerd out and do this kind of stuff because everyone wants to do something else like watch sports ball or whatever. So what I guess I would say to that person, if what you're doing right now, if you're a solo or you're like one person in a tiny org and you've got something that works, like, and you've got people that are giving you feedback that this communication is great, it's helpful, I understand it, it's useful to me, and we use it and we make decisions with it, and you haven't like I can't tell you to switch. One thing I will tell you is, and I know there's like 3 of you that are going to go, but I tried it and it didn't work, and yeah, I'm sorry, it doesn't work for everything. If it's an R markdown thing that does a ggplot, like that just works in Quarto. Like it is just it really does almost work, everybody. It almost does work. It will work perfectly soon. But almost every single thing is it works perfectly in it than it does in R mark. So if that is it, I would say first, Quarto is a single binary install, like the package install in every system, so you don't have to know how to do anything else that's out there. If it's an R thing, you've already got R installed, so you can deal with that on there. If it's already been doing a Python, you're already doing it in Python, so you've got that on there as well too. So it's one more binary, and it's a command line tool. We're not talking a giant IDE like RStudio or like VS Code. It's one more binary. And if that one binary switch out lets someone else maybe help you make things prettier, because maybe you got feedback that it isn't as helpful, or maybe it isn't communicating it as well as it could, or it's not as pristine as it could be. Because like there's some, just as an example, like there's recent studies that just got posted this past week that I already blathered about, that shows annotation directly on charts gets better response from people that actually interpret those charts and read those charts as just a general person. Maybe that person isn't doing that and they're going to go do that. Or if you're going to touch it, why don't you touch it and touch Quarto at the same time too? Because I don't think everything is static. I don't think things remain the same. I think things that do probably aren't that useful in the long run. But so those two things, like maybe I can't convince you if it's already perfect and everyone works with it and you need to be productive and do what you do. But I think that I can build a use case for almost anybody to give it a try.
Gotcha. So here's an interesting sort of question from the other side, which is from sort of Michael's theme, which is that what is the argument you would make to so the non-coder, but not on the production side, but on the consumption side, right? That says, like you should like support the teams or the infrastructure, other things so that they can use Quarto, right? Be it like give them the server they need or give them the access on their machines to run it on they need, right? Like what are the consumers of the outputs going to get for an organization using Quarto?
So the consumer side, I would argue you give them the first decent interact. There's a lot of I have feels about interactive visualizations. We can have a conversation on Twitter at any time about that. I'm a static first person. I will always be a static first person. But I believe that there is good use cases for interactive visualization. I think if you can show someone a really, and I'm blanking off the top of my head, there's a really great observable HQ presentation online this week or next week, and I'll try to get it and blather back on Twitter, blast it back on Twitter again, from folks talking about like how to actually do this. And it's from an actual real practical thing where it's like a heat map associated with like health data. You do one of those and people have the ability to go explore data in a way they didn't before. And it looks really good and it fits with the branding that your organization has. And you and like, and you did that, like you or your team did that. You suddenly got everyone to bite. Like everyone's like, oh, can I have more of this, please? Like, so, I mean, I'm not trying to encourage drug use, but like, it's like a crack dealer, right? You're going to give them a little bit of a great thing and they're going to go, whoa, can I have some more of that? And then you just kind of hooked on that pipeline supply to kind of go out there. So just try it. Because some of the like there's some things we'll be producing over the next couple of weeks and making it visible, but I've done all the experimentation with like inside Observable, like inside Quarto, between R and Observable, and it's just going to be out into the real world. And it isn't just vanilla basic stuff either. It's kind of, I think it's kind of neat stuff. So like just try that tree. You try the trickle out, get some practice at it, and definitely focus on interactive first, because that's where some of the really big benefits of this are. But then that your ability to communicate stuff from your team in a really accessible way, in a really beautiful way, will also probably get you better funding within your organization, better support within your organization, folks knocking on your door to do more of that other work that, like I said, that my team does, like the BI work, the sales work, and all the other stuff too. Yeah, Maya. Yeah, Maya. Oh, Maya's awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so in the chat, but
Yeah.
I was talking about all the stuff that is coming up, this presentation from Maya Gann. So
Oh
that's
yeah, Maya's
back
awesome.
here.
Maya's so awesome.
Okay, well, we're at 30, which I think is sort of our informal end time. So everybody, let's thank Bob again for a great and impassioned and super informative presentation, which I certainly learned a lot from. It was a good opportunity. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Once again, look out, we got the Neo4j conference coming up. We got R in Government coming up, and then next month, again, for everybody around the world can join us in hybrid, but for those in New York, can join us for Toph Allen's talk down in Soho. And you should, if you're a member or if you're not a member, want to become a member, look out for that announcement at the end of this week or early next week. So thank you all very much once again. Thanks, Bob, and have a good night, everybody.